Thank you. Was that Dan?
Yes, it's Dan.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
And Dan is off to Alaska soon here. He's got a cabin up in Alaska. Anyway, well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, June 24th, 2021. Where did that month go? That's those summer months. They just scream by. This is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority being held virtually pursuant to the governor's order, Stay Safe MN order. A few things to cover, of course, before we start the meeting. And today we don't have any public hearing matters, so community comment will be the only time a resident can call in to provide comment via phone. And remember, you're allowed to speak to the HRA commissioners about anything that's not on today's agenda or not scheduled for a future public hearing. So if you want to call in for community comment on a matter of concern to you, the number is 800-374-0221, 800-374-0221. Conference ID number is 519-9223, 519-9223. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Our administrative assistant, Liz Olson, will time you and let you know when you are up against the 3-minute mark, and then you need to wrap up your comments. And to the extent we can avoid any redundancy, that's always a good thing. So thanks in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting online using different types of software and people participating from their own homes or offices. Of course, we hope there won't be any issues. Unfortunately, we've already had one this morning with Commissioner Anderson, but be assured that we'll do our best to continue to operate the meeting as best we can. So we'll call the meeting to order, and Ms. Olson, will you do roll call, please?
Commissioner Staunton.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next matter is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got a form of agenda that's been published to the public and for us as well. You should have it in front of you. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the form of meeting agenda? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
All right, Member Anderson moves, Commissioner Anderson moves, Commissioner Jackson seconds the approval of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Ms. Olson?
Commissioner Staunton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pierce.
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson.
Aye.
Chair Hovland.
Aye. The meeting agenda is approved. And next, we're going to move on to community comment. And now we're at that point where residents who would like to speak to the HRA about something not on today's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing can interact with us. Again, to participate, call 800-374-0221. Conference ID is 5199223, 5199223. Press *1 to speak. An operator will put you in the queue, and Director Benarott will bring you into the HRA meeting. And then again, a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Administrative Assistant Liz Olson will time you and let you know when you're up against the 3-minute mark. Director Benarott, do we have anybody in the queue to speak to the HRA this morning in the community comment portion of the agenda?
Good morning. I am sitting pretty lonely again this morning. As you know, though, there is a delay in the broadcast, so I would recommend we wait a minute or so in case people are trying to get in. My clock shows that it's 7:38, so I will come back to you at 7:39 or when I have a caller, whichever is first.
Thank you.
It is now 7:39 and my operator assures me that no one is trying to get in, so I think it is safe for you to move forward with the agenda.
All right, thank you, Director Benarott. The next item on the agenda this morning is the consent agenda, and there are 4 items on the consent agenda for potential adoption. Is there any commissioner who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Commissioner Staunton.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to remove item 6D as in dog.
Thank you.
I think it's related as well to the 5146 Eden Avenue discussion. And I'd like to discuss it in conjunction with that. I don't know whether that means we should approve it after or before, but I think it's so related that I kind of would like to have that as part of the discussion as we're navigating through. So maybe even moving it to 7C.
I think that's a good thought, and I think discussing it before we decide whether to approve it or not is a good thing too. So having it part of that broader discussion is a very good thought. All right, let's move 6D down into the conversation with 7C. And is there anyone else that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda and adopt the items on the consent agenda A through C, and with the exclusion then of D?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Pierce seconds. We've had a motion and a second to adopt the items A through C on the consent agenda and exclude 6D for further discussion. Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call, please, Ms. Olson.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Commissioner Pierce,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Chair Hubland.
Aye. The items on the consent agenda A through C are adopted and D is deferred. To our discussion, I guess it's actually on 7B. So then let's move into the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda, which is under section 7. And the first matter we have there this morning is a potential adoption of resolution 2021-05, which would support affordable housing at 4040 70th Street using tax increment financing. This is, I think, a long-awaited discussion as we've been going through the process of dealing with that piece of property. And Stephanie Hawkinson, our Affordable Housing Development Manager, has this presentation. Ms. Hawkinson?
Good morning. I will share the screen. That working for you all?
It is. It could be larger, but it's on the screen.
Wait, there we go.
There, that's better.
Okay, and I need to shrink you guys. Okay.
Oh, proposed project now has a name.
Oh, yes, it's Cornelia View. The Cornelia View Apartments. So, good morning. At this stage in the development process, you're going to be hearing about Cornelia View. The ramping up of when we start talking about it is just going to continue to increase and I will be presenting it with some regularity. So thank you for letting me take the time today. At the last HRA meeting, I came before you to seek approval for a public hearing on August 4th regarding creating a TIF district for this development. This is the process and the intent moving forward. The reason I'm coming to you today is in large part because the Minnesota housing application for a loan and tax credits is due July 15th, prior to our public hearing. Early support from the city goes a long way in leveraging funds from this source and the Met Council, whose application is due in September. We followed a similar timeline for the Sound on 76th and Amundsen Flats, where prior to those developers submitting their funding applications to the state, and prior to a TIF district being created. The request today is for approval of up to just shy of $2 million in TIF for the development of Cornelia View Apartments. And in order for these funds to truly be available, the city will need to go through the August 4th public hearing and approve a TIF district. If the TIF district is not approved, this resolution essentially does become obsolete. And, you know, this is not your first rodeo, so a lot of what I'm saying today, I apologize, seems a little repetitive. I sometimes sound like a broken record when I come to you, but it's in part for the broader audience as well. So I don't mean to constantly re-educate or appear to be doing so. You've heard from me multiple times on the challenges of financing affordable housing. So as I was saying, this primer serves the purpose of both explaining why TIF is needed on this particular development and explaining why the government is an essential partner in the creation of affordable housing. Cornelia View Apartments, I'm sorry, oh, I thought I heard someone ask a question. Cornelia View Apartments will serve seniors with incomes from below 30% of AMI to 60% of the AMI. This translates to serving households with incomes ranging from $22,000 for a household of one to $50,400 for a household of two. Rents will range from about $590 for one bedroom to about $1,400 for a two bedroom. And that's based on today's rents. A rent schedule is published every year by HUD, and those are the tax credit limits. So when it comes to the project actually opening, these rents may be different. With a cap on rents that's not based on the market, there's a cap on the whole operating income, and that includes what can be allocated for construction financing and debt. Although there are some construction cost differences between market rate and affordable housing, especially related to the size of the units, interior finishes, and amenities, many of the costs between market rate and affordable are really the same, regardless of what tenants can pay. The acquisition of land is not based on whether the development is affordable or not. That is a fixed cost, which is relatively high in Edina. Other costs are also fixed. In affordable housing, some expenses are arguably higher than in market rate deals, especially legal fees. Some affordable developments may have 12 or more funding sources, each of which come with their own attorneys. Bond financing fees can be high too, with extra legal costs attached. With affordable housing developments, the amount of debt that can be leveraged ranges between 30 to 70% of the total construction cost. With Cornelia View Apartments, debt financing will provide roughly 40% of the total financing needed. The remaining 60% needs to come from other sources. So people argue, why is affordable housing so expensive? And in some cases, aside from finishes, it can be more expensive than market rate. There's a lot more compliance issues. There's a lot more eyes on what's going on, and those just kind of add costs. So it's not an issue that's unique to Edina. This is a national problem. So, you know, the, affordable housing may have similar construction costs to market rate development, but they have far less earning potential to pay off bank construction loans. Therefore, there's a gap, the difference between what can be borrowed and what it costs to build affordable housing. This can be for an apartment or a single family house. So this is where government plays a role. Lupe Development Partners and Ecumen, the developers of Cornelia View Apartments, will be seeking many sources to fill that gap. They've already submitted and have been awarded funding from Hennepin County, which I'm really excited about. They will also be seeking funding from us, Minnesota Housing, and Metropolitan Council, as stated. You've seen this graph. We don't need to go over it in detail. Nick Anhut presented to you recently. What it shows is that as rents are reduced, the larger the gap. Our other funding partners, especially Minnesota Housing, give priority, and actually VII.B for bonds, give priority to proposed developments that meet the deeper affordability ranges. there is the understanding that in order to get some of those really deeply affordable levels, rental assistance is needed. The conflict is Metro HRA is moving away from project-based Section 8 and moving towards where the tenants have more control over where they live. So the availability of rental assistance, even though there are priorities for deeper affordability, the availability of the rental assistance that makes that possible is decreasing. So the developments that get the highest priority are those that serve higher numbers of folks that are in the 30% or 50% of area median income range. It is nearly impossible to fully finance a development that serves only households with incomes at 60% of the area median income. Therefore, high levels of gaps are needed to make affordable housing a reality. You know, as this table shows, if it's just a 60% project, gap is far lower than if it's a 30% project. And so affordable housing developments, in order to get funding sources from other places, need to reach some 30%, some 50%, and some 60% folks. With debt or bank financing contributing to 40% of the construction costs, the remainder must come from low-income housing tax credit equity, public partners in the first, what's called soft debt, or deferred financing. These loans do not require monthly payment, but are due sometime in the future. When the bank debt is satisfied, the building is often refinanced to pay off the other funders, or some of the public funders opt to extend the terms. They will refinance their own to extend the term to keep the money in the project in order to keep the project affordable. Deferred loans and tax credits are very limited. There's only so many that are available. So the application process is very competitive. Cornelia View Apartments will be seeking tax-exempt bond financing, which comes automatically with 4% tax credits. The other two projects we've done recently, including Amundsen Flats that you'll be seeing today, were 9% tax credit deals. One of the reasons for that is both the Sound on 76th and Amundsen Flats were smaller projects, 62 units and 72 units, and they served families. They had 3-bedroom units. And that is a higher priority for Minnesota housing. And the sweet spot for the size of project for 9% credits is roughly like 50 to 60 units. Cornelia View is 118 units and serves seniors, so it would not be eligible for 9% tax credits. But even securing bonds is really competitive. Minnesota is one of the few states in the nation where there's a run on bonds. These are the housing revenue bonds that come with the 4% tax credits. Often, there are enough applications by January 2nd to use up a majority of the pool. They can reapply in August, but there's very limited. So as of June 14th, in fact, I checked MMB's website, there are only $10,000 remaining in these bonds. You can't finance a project with $10,000. So the priority with the state is federally subsidized housing, such as Section 8, which is preservation, those that are falling apart, that have been in service for a while and really need to be updated. Those are the ones priority. I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but this is to explain why we need financing for projects. As Cornelia View is neither an existing affordable housing development, nor family, nor Section 8, the developer must be diligent in how it is structured to make it competitive for financing. TIF is sought to serve to leverage additional debt. It would be a pay-go note. The TIF leveraged in this case would be roughly 6% of the total development cost. What is not reflected in this table is the $3.6 million that the foundation borrowed for land acquisition. This is because the foundation is keeping title to the land. They are not transferring title to the developer. It will be reflected and explained in the applications to show commitment, but it's not included in here. They're doing that in order to secure affordability for 99 years. Adding the land to the budget accounts for 10% of the budget. The cost of the land is 10%. And this further shows how land in Edina is just, it's expensive. You already seen, you know what TIF is. It's the additional increment. The tax base stays pretty much the same. And after the TIF district concludes, all the taxes will go to the taxing jurisdictions. And this is approval of creating this TIF district is what is coming before you as to City Council on August 4th. So one of the reasons to ask for funds today for the application on July 15th is to help leverage those funds and to make this application more competitive. I've showed you this type of chart before. We looked at the pointing system for this development, and in red I have the efficient use of resources. And with this commitment, or this resolution, it bumps the efficient use of resources to 27 points, where they would not have that same level of points. Now you'll see that in other categories, it seems like they have relatively low points. Well, this is again, in fact, due to the fact that it's not serving, it's not a shelter, it's not permanent supportive housing, it is not serving large families that are experiencing homelessness, and those are all priority points for the state. And so we need to try to get points for this development wherever we can. So the next steps are the TIF hearing for the creation of the district on August 4th. In November, roughly, we'll review the redevelopment agreement and come for approval on that. And then early 2022, we hope the remaining funding awards will be announced. And I will stop sharing.
I thought that was a very thorough presentation, Manager Hawkins. Thank you for that. Does anyone on the HRA have questions for Manager Hawkinson? Commissioner Staunton?
Thanks, Stephanie, for the presentation. It gives me a good sense of the tax increment financing for the housing piece of it. You've also talked about leveraging some TIF for the surrounding infrastructure, the West Promenade. How does that fit into this, or is that a separate kind of exploration?
Chair, Commissioners, it is a separate discussion. We have had some preliminary conversations with our Dorsey and Ellers regarding this. TIF is the housing TIF for this project is not eligible to be used for street reconstruction. Since we're using housing TIF, the road reconstruction would have to be imperative to fix in order to make the housing move forward. And it would only be able to be on the immediate borders of this site. So both Dorsey and Ellers believe that using the TIF that's being allocated for this project would not be eligible.
Sounds like Manager Neal has something to add.
Yep. Manager.
I have better news to add to that. That we do have multiple pots of money, if we want to call it that, or multiple revenue sources that we can use for the West Promenade or changes to the associated infrastructure, particularly transportation infrastructure that serves this site. We can't use the TIF that we're talking about creating here, but we do have other sources such as our capital reserve funds, our unallocated general fund balance, but probably better is our Centennial Lakes TIF dollars. So we do have multiple possibilities. It all depends really on the scope and scale of what we're talking about building there. But I just want to assure you of that.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure we weren't forgetting that in the midst of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Good catch. Other questions? So, Commissioner Pierce.
Oh, yes. So I definitely appreciate the follow-up there, Manager Neal.
That does make me happier. I know I always look the same, but this is happier James. Uh, so that was one of my questions. My second question, if you could bring up, I think it's slide 6, and this isn't at all to derail the path we're on. It's just a question I had. And this, to me, this all kind of goes back to messaging. And so all of our residents they're they're not we're paying taxes, but we're also putting in emotional equity into every project we do. And so the question I had on this slide, we always frame these, and I get this, but we always frame them from the perspective that we need to fund the project. And there's a underlying question that it appears, right, the way we present this sometimes, that we're subsidizing a for-profit developer. And so I understand us putting equity in, using our various vehicles to fund the project because it's expensive. But I just wondered, if I'm looking at these numbers, how would I interpret the revenue, the gross revenue that's generated from the apartment building, so that I can kind of detach the equity as a city we're putting in, to ensure that it's only being used as an example to subsidize the construction of the project, and it's not being utilized to subsidize the loss in revenue. And that doesn't quite come through on this slide. It may not be accurate. It typically isn't accurate to just use the rental income as the only source of gross revenue in these projects. So I'm just curious, how would we look at the financials in that way? And if that construct doesn't make sense, that's fair too. But that's the question that I have.
Chair Commissioners, when underwriting in affordable housing development and truly a market rate development, you look at the net operating income. You look at, and the net operating income really is the rental income plus any other fees that go into the project minus the expenses for operating it and what's left. And then what's left is used to leverage the debt and primarily to leverage the debt and provide some sort of return. Affordable housing developers do not look at IRR or return on investment or return on equity, or they tend to not look at that. Built in their budget is a developer's fee. Because there's risk, and you can't, no one can expect these developers to go forward and do this for free. They need to be paid for their work. And so built into that, in the total development cost is a developer fee that is not paid entirely at closing. When we close on financing, they get a portion then, they get a portion when the construction is completed, they get a portion when it's leased up, they get a portion when it's stabilized, and then they get a portion over long-term cash flow. I don't think that's totally answering your question, but really, when underwriting these, we do look at the money that's coming in to support the project, less what it costs to operate it. And so that's the operating budget. The construction budget is totally different. And so the construction budget, we look at, the per unit costs. Those are changing because materials are going up, and then they're going down. They're just in flux right now, so it's really hard to predict. And we look at, that there's a cap on how much an architect can charge. With affordable housing, this is not true with market rate. There's a cap on what an architect can charge, and then you have all your costs, and there's standards. And so we kind of look at them compared to what we see as industry standards for the total development cost, how much it costs per unit. And so then you get the overall cost of the project. And then you have to look at what debt, construction debt can be raised through the the rent levels and the expenses to figure out how to pay for that construction. So there's a process for doing that. It's different than with market rate, because you tend to not have outside investors other than through tax credits who come in because they expect a rate of return. You don't have that with affordable. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
Manager Neal?
You know, the other thing I'll add to what Ms. Hawkinson said is that part of the exercise that we're engaged in when we go through these presentations and funding discussions at the local level is that the way the conventional methods of funding affordable housing, at least in Minnesota, really kind of pyramid up to state agencies or statewide agencies, depending on how you want to look at it. And they have a great deal of money, and they have their own methodology about how and where they decide to invest their funds. And what we're really doing from a kind of a macro standpoint is we are helping developers pursue those dollars and bring them to Edina by making some kind of contribution, whether it's emotional or it's regulatory or it's financial. But we are showing those funding agencies that we care about this enough to put money into the deal. And by making their deal in Edina more satisfying or a better overall project for people, for affordable housing projects, we make their deal more desirable and worthy in the eyes of state funders anyway, to invest here in Edina as opposed to some other community.
Thanks. So I would just offer that I think it would be good for us to maybe put that lens on it moving forward, so that we have a better way to articulate the various sources of equity. And I've not heard us talk a lot about emotional equity, but we just haven't coined it that way. We've all talked about it. And then I think it's important for us to understand that from an emotional equity perspective. And then I think it would be good for us to at least have some sense of how these funds are being used, and whether it's just once things are approved, whether it's just us going back to just validate how these sources are being used. If it's construction accounting, right, I get that. We're investing to get the project done. And if the project costs 10 million, we put in 10, and they only use 8, then 2 comes back. And I know I'm using a simple example, but it is almost that simple, so that our residents understand how these sources are being used within the community. So I would just offer that we think about, is there a simple way to explain that? That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Pierce. Manager Hawkinson?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I now regret I have removed about 5 slides that talk about how this fits in with the comprehensive plan, and how that was, a community process with the survey, with the Vision Edina, and how this does comply with what residents have stated that they want in the city. So it's not just a money game. I removed all those slides. I thought my presentation was already too long, and I will not do that in the future, because this project is not in a vacuum, and it's not just a money game. It is based out of surveys and input from the community, the task force, the comp plan, everything. And so this is fits in with a larger vision of what we want in Edina.
Yeah, that makes me smile too, Manager Hawkins. I think it is important for people to see that bigger message and how these things fit together. So I wasn't suggesting that this didn't fit, but what I am suggesting is we have not, in a succinct way, with each of these developments, kind of put it in this grand view so people understand each of the investments and can see the bigger picture. I just think it's really important for us to continue to just drive that home. And it may seem repetitive, but I think after you communicate it over and over and over, I think people have a deeper understanding of the bigger picture and the value here. And it's really not incumbent on the developer to do that. We could exchange a developer anytime we choose to because we own the overall plan, you know? And so I think that is for us to determine how it gets communicated, not and less so on the behalf of it's less so the driver of the developer to communicate it in that way. So thank you.
Commissioner Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my part, I just want to say that this is a very important part of our housing puzzle in Edina, and the inclusion of senior affordable housing for 99 years is quite a victory. And it's been an effort from community-wide effort to bring affordable housing into our community. We are a caring community and we value economic diversity. And I just want to say that I'm really excited about this and I'm glad it's moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Commissioner Pierce raised some interesting issues that sort of flow from his comments and this emotional equity or this commitment from our community. And it might be good to think about how in the future we want to explain why we're in this business in the first place. I mean, our town says it's important to do, but the underlying market forces that have created these shortages of housing all across the country, plus the corollary increase in the cost of housing. And then you look at our commitment to be involved in something like senior affordable. How do we explain to folks that it's not about developer subsidy? It's about, and it's maybe not even, how do you explain it's not about subsidizing people that are living there in a different way? Or how do we explain it at all? So that it has a lay sort of resonance to it, if you will. Because I just in the last week, I've been asked 3 times, I think, what's affordable housing? What does that mean? Is that we're writing a check to somebody who's living in an apartment to subsidize their living? What does it all mean? And why do we need to do it? You know, so, and they're not being judgmental. They're just curious. They just don't understand what it means and what we're doing. So I think it's something that requires continuing thought about how to express it in a way where it, and language is really important on how you describe things. And one way you describe it may resonate with one group of people and not with another. So you have to continually work at it to try to figure out how to explain it. Anyway, remember Commissioner Pierce raised a really interesting line of thought here, at least for me. Thanks. All right, so what we're doing here today potentially is to get us positioned, or the developer positioned, to go to Minnesota Housing Finance. We need to support the idea of senior affordable housing at 4040 West 70th Street with the potential use of tax increment financing, because we still haven't had that hearing matter yet. Is that a synopsis of it at the end of the day, Manager Hawkinson?
Yes, it is.
Right, and that is what Resolution 2021-05 captures adequately.
Yes, sir.
For your purposes. And I noticed you had a red line and a clean version, and it looks like the need for TIF, if you will, has decreased from the initial calculations that were made by about $500,000 or more.
Chair, Commissioners, the first number came from the developer. The second number came from Ellers. We are still in some meetings to figure out what the final number is that we're going to land at. We were concerned about overpromising since Minnesota Housing will be getting a copy of this resolution. We were concerned about overpromising, which is why the amendment was put in.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that explanation. So we're just taking a cautious approach to it, but still potentially rendering our support. Is there anyone on the HRA that would move the adoption of Resolution 2021-05 supporting affordable housing at 4040 West 70th Street using tax increment financing?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Staunton, second by a tie between our a virtual tie. It's a photo finish on the second. I'll leave it up to Ms. Olson to decide how she wants to deal with that. We've got a motion and a second on the motion as stated. Any further discussion? Ms. Olson, would you call the roll, please, on the motion as stated?
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Commissioner Pierce,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Chair Hupland.
Aye. The motion passes and the resolution 2021-05 is adopted. So thank you, Manager Hawkinson. Again, you're doing just terrific work on behalf of our community in this area. So
Thank you.
always greatly appreciated. We can't tell you that enough, I don't think.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you, Mr. Min, for being with us this morning as well, and anybody else from his team. And then let's move on to the old public works site, 5146 Eden Avenue. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion about that, and Manager Neuendorf has that particular matter this morning. I don't know if Manager Neal has any introductory comments, but
I do not. We have a general discussion ready for you today, and Mr. Neuendorf's going to lead it.
very good.
Yes, good morning. So we've been discussing the old public works site on Eden Avenue for several months now, making continuing progress. And our staff at the city continues to work with Franchu to help craft a realistic vision of what can actually be delivered and accomplished on that site for the community. At this point, we continue to look at a senior co-op, probably on the south side of the property, and a northern plaza on the north part. That comes from the conversations this group has had back in May and early June. That plaza would include some type of hospitality use, a restaurant, something with food and beverage operations, but primarily something that creates public activity on that space. So that's been I think we've had general consensus on that general direction. But as we've been working through some issues with Franchu, it became apparent that before we can get anything in writing, we really need to dial in a little bit more on what your visions are for that northern portion. Over the months, we've discussed everything from a public park to a food truck court, to a full service restaurant, to a cafe. All of those are good options, but if we're going to actually get something delivered, we really have to dial that in and get some clarity on what is the priority. Of all the great options out there, how would you like myself and the folks at Franchu to really spend our time? There's lots of folks in the marketplace, but we don't want to waste their time, our time, or your time. So that's the purpose of the discussion today. When it comes to the hospitality sector, it's also very nuanced, right? There's pros and cons of different types of users. Some will only own their property. Others are willing to lease. Some can only be successful with a decent sized surface parking lot right at their front door. That's how their customers work. Others can operate with street parking. So there's a whole bunch of pros and cons from these, and we've got a good team with us here today to answer questions and guide that discussion. But again, the goal of today's conversation is to hone in on that preferred outcome so that we can have Franchu effectively find those viable options and candidates for our future consideration. This morning, we're joined by Dave Anderson, Dean Williamson from Franchu, also Alex Hall, I believe Bill Catter from United Properties, and they're going to present some examples and really guide the conversation here to help get a little bit more clarity. In your packet, I did include a general outline of the discussion. I think there's three main questions or kind of open-ended issues we want to dive into. The first is the preference for the type of user. Is it a full-service restaurant? Is it a seasonal restaurant? Is it something more transient like a food truck court? Lots of good options there. The second thing we want to touch on is that real estate transaction. Again, some users will only be successful if they own their real estate. Others can be successful if they rent. Others can be successful if the HRA builds them a shell and then they rent that from us. So it'd be helpful to know if any of those are more appealing than the other. And I think the final topic of discussion here that's all related is the operations and the maintenance of the site. At this point, we've programmed about 1.5 acres or so of space on the northern portion of the site. A lot of different ways to go here as well. If it's a full service restaurant, they could operate the whole site, maintain it, and the city is not on the hook. In the past, there were discussions that the city could also operate things here, show movies, build an ice rink, build a number of different type of park and rec activities. And there's always a hybrid model where the city does part and the developer or operator does part. But all of those have impact to the capital financing of the initial project, as well as to our long-term budget. So again, before we spend a lot of time chasing after a lot of different options, we thought that if we can narrow the scope and really identify what is preferred. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave Anderson. He's got a presentation to share, and the whole team is here to answer any questions, including questions about the pedestrian bridge and how that landscaping and general site planning works. Happy to answer any questions there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
All right, thanks, Manager Neuendorf. And I know Bill Catter is here with us, and then I think Terry Menard from Confluence is with his team, with that team as well. So Dave Anderson, welcome. Dave, you're on mute. Can't hear you yet, Dave.
Okay.
There you go.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I am on the telephone as well as video here. So good morning, Chair, Commissioners, yes, with us today is our development team, our team of both Franchu, United Properties, and our consultants, and we are here to really participate in the discussion, I think, as Bill outlined, and narrowing the focus and discussion around the type of hospitality activation and elements that we would bring together with the senior co-ops and arrangement of the site and those pieces. We'll get into some concepts and themes here, really, that we see being part of this, being part of the opportunity, being part of the success formula for the ideas that had came forth. Recalling that just really June 10th, there was some good discussion at the HRA meeting around some of the types of things we'd like to see happen here. So we'll share a few thoughts and really would like to hear your feedback and thoughts about this and how these pieces come together. So I'm going to go through a couple of quick visuals and then if we can get that up on screen here. Let me know if that that has arrived.
It has.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we'll have other members of our team here share in with some additional thoughts. But just to get started here, and we'll walk through the thinking here on dining, hospitality, and activation of this site, and really the element of how we would program and design and envision the north portion with co-ops in the south, this acre to an acre and a half experience that we'd be creating on the north portion of the site. We think of this as dynamic space. When we're talking about dining and hospitality, we think about a real dynamic menu and dynamic set of offerings by that operator. And we will talk about those different operator models and types of concepts that may be available here. And then really about creating the experience. And what we've heard from the commission in the discussion is really what you're driving towards here is creating that experience for the community, and really a place, a gathering place, and a central place really to activate and offer to all ages and generations. And that importance of indoor and outdoor activation, we'll talk about that in terms of the commercial aspects of the site. But a few of the ideas here, as you see in this collage, is really using glass and transparency, which can be illuminated, create some excitement around the site and drawing people in to the project. There would be a variety of ways people can gather both inside and outside. And as we've seen the restaurant and hospitality business evolve, even in the recent past year with COVID and so forth, this idea of outdoor dining and creating experiences around more outdoor options for dining really has emerged and has become a great opportunity as we think about how this site can be activated. So thinking about that, the kinds of things that draw people in, the kinds of dining experiences we may create, we'd like to really hear from you, your thoughts, feedback. What kind of dining and hospitality experience could you see here by the commercial operating partner?
Dave.
And then
Dave.
Yes.
Dave, I was going to just make a few comments here, but go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And then talking
That was Bill Catter.
Oh, Bill? Okay. Bill? Yeah.
If I could just make a few comments, I just wanted to say a few things here. And good morning, HR commissioners and staff. Appreciate your continuing to think about this site with us. Just a few things. United Properties has done this work with the city in a public-private partnership over at the Centennial Lakes when we developed that in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And one of the things the team thought about here was creating something unique that is a draw to the Grandview district. And so what you're going to see as Dave and the team continues to walk us through this is something that will be a draw and an anchor for people who experience the Grandview district. And I know I've said this, I was involved at the very start of this project, but I am a resident of West Edina. And as we thought about this, we thought about what could really become unique to this Grandview district. What is missing in West Edina? And I'm hopeful you'll see this as the start, a conversation starter about adding something unique and important over here. So that's really the genesis of this. And as I said earlier, we have had a history of doing this both in Edina. We've also added some of these public spaces and parks in our work in the North Loop. And just excited. This is an energizing conversation for us, and I think it's a great companion use for the co-ops that we've been discussing with you. So Dave, I just wanted to throw those comments in. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Catter.
So speaking to the public realm and the activation of the kinds of things that can happen in the sense of a larger green and gathering space, some of the concepts here we can touch on and hear from you would be those kinds of things that really are multi-generational, multifunctional. So we have a very flexible concept for that space. It can be programmed seasonally. It can be programmed for a variety of hosting a variety of types of events. And what you see here really is a representation of some of those seasonal aspects from the winter months and kinds of activities that could take place. Those summer months, using that lawn for movie nights, for gatherings, festivals, really a variety of types of uses. We're also going to talk a little bit about managing the grade of the site and meaning the topography again with this site from north to south. We're managing some 30 feet of grade differential from the top of Arcadia to Eden Avenue. And we really continue to envision how that works and integrates. And with the senior cooperatives placed in the south and the elements we're talking about in the north, we think there's very much the ability to do that. So we can come back to any of these slides if you'd like to. Certainly would like to talk through these concepts here, and we'll quickly move to conceptually. And this is really to open a discussion. This is not something intended to be the plan, but it's certainly intended to give us a sense of what is possible. And again, working collaboratively here with the HRA, looking at that north portion of the site. So what you see here is moving the co-ops. We're planning right now in a target range of about 90 units, plus or minus, and that would shift to the south and create that presence on Eden Avenue and leave that acre to an acre plus on the north side of the site. With the pedestrian bridge now underway in terms of engineering, design, and planning, the idea and concept you see here is about 110 by 210 foot area, which would be the lawn or the yard. That really is a green space that links up with the pedestrian bridge, provides a very nice complement for that infrastructure and that investment in infrastructure, and allows that space to really be activated and programmed, as a integrated and or a separate piece when those kinds of activities are happening. The interior component here, as you see, and we can talk about, is really that idea of that dining experience. And this would really give us a starting point of discussion around talking about the kind of operators from, really you have from the eatery, very small boutique eatery all the way up to a full service restaurant concept. It's really wide ranging. But the idea here is, again, that draw, that center of activity that really is going to bring people in and provide an outdoor experience, as Bill mentioned, unlike anything available in Edina and perhaps unlike anything available in the metro area. So we really see how that could become a centerpiece to the Grandview district, really become a gathering place for the community. This is where you bring your family and friends, and this is where you can participate in activities, again, seasonally, all seasons, the idea of fire pits and lawn games, some opportunities for different types of courts. This concept shows, not only a restaurant building or a dining element, but also the ability to bring a multi-use event canopy, perhaps on this portion of the site. So that could activate as a structure or a shelter in which you could have indoor or outdoor events, certain times of the year. So that's really, I think, for the starting point, a little bit more detail. If there's questions that we have and would like to discuss, we can jump into this a bit further. We have looked at the site in a couple of different ways, just to study and test what are some of the elements here. One important element is parking. Any operator is going to really rely on a good proximity to a supply of parking to support the operation. Both of these concepts here show how parking could work, depending on whether it was north or south. Of course, we've been looking at this and the image here of having that lawn as a centerpiece to the north would allow us to place a certain amount of parking for the operation as a combined entry and shared use with the co-ops. That gets us a portion of the parking. We expect and will need to really understand the availability of the Brookside ramp as additional parking supply from the standpoint of the operator's needs and use. And that will be an important part of this exercise going forward, is to really assure that that ramp and access now with the pedestrian bridge becomes available and again can support the activation of this operation. So Bill, because we've Bill Catter, and I'll just chair, maybe have Bill chime in. There are elements we've thought about in this concept because of its integration with the senior co-ops. We just, again, allow our team here at United Properties to make any other comments there about the relationship of these two uses.
Well, I think it's a very exciting use for the co-ops, right? And I think it's an exciting use probably for the residents of Avador. It continues to be some residential brought into the Grandview district. If ultimately if the HRA and council would like this overall plan use, and quite frankly, if we do this right and we do it together, I'm confident it'll be a catalyst for other redevelopment around this district. So I think they're very compatible uses. There is as you know, there's a small surface parking field between the co-op and this public and semi-private set of uses. And there's two reasons for that. One would be to afford some visitor parking for the Applewood community, the independent co-op community. It does have visitors, and really all of the other parking we have put within the building itself. And so this would allow some visitors to it. But secondly, and probably more importantly, it allows folks, we're relying heavily on this ramp and bridge to park any concept like this. And that solution will work for many, but the disabled or elderly will need parking immediately next to this venue to be able to enjoy it. And Dave said this, all of these uses to us would be the indoor, outdoor, year-round activities, curling, lawn bowling, bag toss, pickleball, and event center. Those are things that I think are a community asset and really are a place for family and friends to get together. Many of you probably have been patrons of Hilltop, and Hilltop has really been a strong addition over here for West Edina, but it is one of the only sit-down restaurants in West Edina. And we think this would continue to build off of what Hilltop has put together. And for all of the things Hilltop does right, they just don't have outdoor space. And let's face it, residents want to be outdoors for a big part of our season. So we think this would accomplish that. And just a final comment on that green space. There's many things that could be. It could be an outdoor movie theater. It could be a concert venue. Most importantly, it could also evolve over time as this district matures and you see additional redevelopment. So we like the idea of having a placeholder there for this to evolve as time goes by, and other properties may change their orientation or development around what could be a spoke here for that. So that's really all I would say on that, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Catter.
Chair, I think this would be the point. It would open it up for discussion. We'd really welcome the feedback on this. We looked at this as a discussion session again, a working session, if you will, with the HRA. We're happy to talk about some of those business model elements Bill touched on, the evaluation of operators and the credit aspects of procuring an operator. There's a variety of things we would continue forth here in assuring that this is, an economically feasible project, and those elements are carried forth to work towards this direction. So appreciate the opportunity here to talk through this and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Catter, I had one question for you that Manager Newendorf caused me to think about it. With respect to potential restaurant operators, in your experience, might we find someone who would be interested not in necessarily owning property, but in doing a ground lease where we would continue to own the property, but they would be willing to invest their money to build a facility on a long-term ground lease, if the HRA and the council thought that was important to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very good possibility, Mayor Upland. The restaurants will view that as a form of financing, and I think it enables you to have approval rights over how they activate these outdoor spaces. So it would be consistent. That approach would be consistent with a public-private partnership to get this done.
All right. Thanks for that clarification, commissioners. We have. I think we've collectively thought we have the south half of the property somewhat figured out with the co-op concept in terms of the number of units and affordability, all those things. We'll still have that conversation ahead of us. But with respect to that, what I'll call roughly the north half of the property, are some of these ideas that Manager Neuendorf and the Brown Shoe United Properties team have brought forward, starting to capture anything in your own minds about visions that you might have had? Are they helping guide some of those internal thoughts that you've had?
And we stop sharing so we can
Yeah,
see.
let's do that. Let's just going to thank you, Commissioner Pierce. And Commissioner Pierce, did you want to speak, or Commissioner Staunton? Go ahead.
So, so I like a lot of what I'm seeing here. I think, you know, I hadn't thought about the notion of the green space on the north side of this and the restaurant kind of in the middle, but there's a lot of reasons that that makes sense. Not the least of which is that was kind of part of an original, one of those photographs from Dave that you presented is from the Grandview framework of it's a green square from Montreal actually. And it's in a couple of places in the Grandview framework. And I think there's a couple of advantages to having that green space on the far north end. One is it really invites redevelopment of the parcels to the north. The Starbucks, CSM property eventually would be invited to turn around and face that green space. The other thing is, I do think I'm persuaded about the need for some surface parking there, and putting it further south, putting the restaurant further south has the advantage of allowing that to be a dual use with the housing to the south. And I like some of the activities. The pickleball is an interesting notion. The lawn bowling or maybe curling or other things as the winter goes on. I love the notion of some kind of a stage or movie theater type place along the north end on that green space. Part of the trick here will be figuring out the relative sizes, and Terry and his team may be helpful on this. Just as an example, that 110 by 210 green space is about what? How many square feet? That's 23,000 square feet. By comparison, the Grandview Square Park that is in behind the library is about 17,000 square feet. So as we're thinking about it, we want to just think about what are the right relative sizes. As somebody once said to me, you want it to never look crowded, but never look empty. And so how we configure that space will be really important, and how a user might want to do that, and how the green space would interface with the space along Arcadia makes a lot of sense. And I'm also interested in this kind of tiered or terraced feel to the Arcadia landscape as you go up the hill. Maybe it levels out and then you go a few more steps and then it levels out again. I think this is a really good start. In terms of the restaurant, I think it should be full service year round. In terms of the real estate transaction, I'm less concerned about getting into the weeds on whether it's a lease or a sale or what, as I am to make sure our interests are protected. So if we go to great lengths to set up this combination of uses, I just want to make sure those uses are durable and that they can't be changed later. So if that's a lease, so be it. But if that's a sale with some kind of easement or retained rights, or as Bill put it, the public-private partnership, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think this is, I'm really intrigued, and I think this is a really good start in the right direction.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners? Commissioner Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually very excited about this, especially on slide 3. And I want to just, I think the one thing that comes up in all of the thoughts about this is the parking issue. And we've got, 30 stalls. I'm trying to, it's so small on my screen. 30 stalls to be shared with the co-op and the restaurant. And as reluctant as I am to encourage putting in parking spots, do we think 30 stalls would serve both a restaurant and the co-op as sort of public access to this space, as well as having the parking ramp? But there's always going to be people who are just going to want to pull up right up next to it for whatever reason, probably most likely mobility issues. But do we think 30 is reasonable and will be inviting to someone to want to build in this space for the restaurant?
Mr. Anderson or Mr. Catter, could someone answer the commissioner's inquiry?
This is Mr. Catter, Commissioner Jackson. The short answer is more to follow on that. We really want to try to encourage use of that ramp and not replicate parking or, our experience is when you introduce cars into a green space, it really changes the dynamic. So I'd like to sit here and tell you that it's enough. But as we get into the marketplace and have discussions with users, we'll have some more feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
Alex
Please.
Hall with United Properties. Yeah, I would add to that right now, the way we have the co-op designed, that the majority of the guest parking and second vehicle parking is on a second level ramp under the west wing of that co-op. So I think the majority of the surface parking that we're currently showing could be dedicated to the restaurant. So I don't see a big, and we'd sign it and reserve it in such a way. So I don't think the co-op is going to need too much of that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's helpful. I love the idea of the lawn as a placeholder. I think that over time, as this unfolds, we'll get a sense of what's going to be the future of this area. And it's, I like also on this slide 3, the tiering, because I think that does address the elevation issues. And I think it's a very clever way of doing that. So overall, I'm really excited about this, and I think it will be an invitation to the community to come in, especially with that lawn on the north side, invites people from the parking ramp to say, hey, this is a public space. So I really like that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Either Commissioner Pierce or Commissioner Anderson, your preliminary thoughts? Do we lose Commissioner Anderson?
Sure, thank you.
Oh, there he is.
Good morning.
Morning.
I think we're moving in the right direction, and I strongly concur with the concepts that have been presented, and also comments from other commissioners. At the same time, I just want to again state that we're only going to do this one time, and so I'd sure want to be positive that what we do is the right thing to do, and we move in the right direction. The detailing of the site as we move to it, I think is, that's all important, obviously. I don't know that 110 by 210 is going to really cut the mustard in terms of activity on that north side lawn. So that's just something to look to. And ultimately the parking is really going to be driven by the nature of the enterprise that is placed there, that opts in. The chair's thoughts in terms of a ground lease, I really concur with. I think that's the right approach. But I'm certain that would need to be a triple net lease arrangement. When we get there, when we determine who the operator is going to be and what the concept will be, That I think is going to lend itself to how many parking spaces we actually need on parking. And we haven't come to that yet. We referred consent agenda item 6D to be part of this conversation. Was it 6D? In any event, the pedestrian bridge. And so how that comes into play and how that provides access to the site and the enterprise is going to be all important, it seems to me, to how much utility there's actually going to be and what type of draw comes into play on the north side. But we're getting right there, and I appreciate the sketches. Whoever did these, the sketches really do suggest the thinking. I think that I like a lot. I think that the tiered aspect is particularly useful. I do notice, we all notice occasionally that the hilltop lot is jammed almost all the time. And the spillover parking onto the street suggests to me that there isn't going to be much on-street parking available here for whatever happens. So as we look towards the ramp and how the ramp plays into it, then our attention has to go to the pedestrian bridge. And I'll withhold comments on that in general until we come to that point of discussion. But so far, I like it a lot. I do agree that I think that the best utility of the operation, the offering here, should be year-round. The design, it needs to be exciting. So Mr. Catter's comments to that effect, I think, are they're particularly well placed. I do like the idea of glass, whether that's energy efficient and whether that ties in. That's a question mark, going forward. But still, however we can design that gives a view to the lawn area and whatever is occurring over there, whatever our final plan is for how that's going to be utilized. I think that would be exciting, and I think is really kind of part of the flow there. So other than that, as we come back to the pedestrian bridge, I'll probably have something to say there, but that's my point of view. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Pierce?
Yeah, I am definitely in support. I like this version of the plan. The only ask I have, and this again is as you think about how to design it, the only issue I have is you actually can't see the site. And so when you're driving down Vernon, you have no idea this is over there. You actually do have to turn on Arcadia or Eden to even see the public works site. So we drive by there all the time and we know it's over there. And so in terms of how do we draw people in, and I don't know what you do with this, if it's, when we put the roundabout in, will that kind of naturally divert traffic? If you have some kind of surface parking that if you turn on Arcadia, it's just natural that it draws you to that area. I'm not sure how we do it, but I think it'd be smart for us to try to figure out, are there things we can do from an external nature to kind of draw some more attention to that area? And it could be the parking ramp and the pedestrian. There could be some treatments there that make it obvious that there's this great venue behind there. That's the only thing I would offer, that we kind of think about, are there some other treatments we could do? Because it is kind of tucked away if you're on Vernon.
Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. Yeah, that's an interesting comment. It's got a bit of the Centennial Lakes situation where you really have to know Centennial Lakes is there, and once you discover it, you think, "Oh my word, this is an unbelievable park." And anyway, so I thought Member Staunton captured a lot of the same things that I've been thinking and expressed them in a really articulate way. As I go from north to south, I like the lawn up in the north side, that connection to the parking ramp, the bridge we're going to talk about momentarily. I liked the idea of, when I look at some of the possibilities from slides 1 and 2, I continue, and I have liked this idea for some time. I love the idea of people being able to come over there for an outdoor movie in the summertime, like they do at Centennial Lakes, and maybe set the screen up so it's running parallel to the railroad tracks, and then people have a lot of spaces in which they can sit. But perpendicular to that, along, I'll call it the Werniff, some kind of small amphitheater for concerts too, I think is a good idea. I'm sensitive to Commissioner Anderson's idea about whether the lawn is right-sized. Although I thought, remember, Commissioner Staunton's reference to the size of the Grandview Square Park relative to this space was really helpful in the understanding of it. And it is about a half an acre, if I remember my calculations correct on number of square feet in an acre, which is 40,000+. I do like the idea of the restaurant down in the core, and where they've got pickleball courts on slide 3 now to the left towards the railroad tracks. When I looked at this, I got to thinking about use. How do you maximize use, whether it's summer or winter? And I don't know exactly what the uses might be through there, but one thing that has stuck in my mind since I was out at that design institute that the U.S. Conference of Mayors put on out in Brooklyn. We took a day trip, a couple hours down at the Brooklyn Bridge Park, and they've got a shed down there. I'll call it a shed with a beautifully designed roof, kind of like what we have out at the outdoor rink at Braemar. It has that real European feel to it. And underneath that shed, which was substantially larger than what we would have here, there were all kinds of things going on. There was tennis, there was basketball games, there were probably pickleball down at the far end. The shed was so big that you couldn't really determine all the uses from a distance. But it does strike me that some architecturally designed shed shed roof would be something to contemplate. Outdoor dining, I think, is important. Maybe that promotes the use of some type of shed as well, a shed roof with the lighting. That's in one of those slides. And I too came to the conclusion when I looked at this that, yeah, you're probably going to have some parking on the site that's going to accommodate users that want to get in there. You know, we think about that situation over by Pinstripes, the shops on Centennial Lakes. That surface lot is used, but the ramp is used too. And I think we'd have that same situation where people get used to the notion that if the stalls were all being occupied for people that were going to the restaurant, and there were people parking along Arcadia's, Commissioner Anderson is noting, they're going to go over and use that ramp because it's going to be fairly easy access. So that's a long way of saying, like the rest of you have said, that I think we're heading in a good direction. Landscaping is going to be really important here, but there's some really interesting uses being proposed here, and you can feel the energy and the dynamism of it just from looking at these rough sketches. And I think that speaks well to what might be coming yet. So I think Manager Neundorf, is that enough for you to work with? And the team and the Frauenschuh United team?
That's very helpful. Dave, is there any other clarification that we missed?
No, thank you, Chair H.R. This was great discussion. We'll move things forward based on the feedback we had today. We'll continue to work with staff, and I think these comments all will be certainly a focus of what we continue to develop here.
All right. Well, I had one other question. I just for your team, and it was, I see Terry Menarek is on the call. Mr. Menarek, with respect to some of these outdoor uses we've described, do you think they can comfortably fit in the spaces as proposed?
Yes, Mayor, I do agree with that. I think there's a lot of flexibility in this lawn to be able to accommodate any of those activities that we're showing in those precedents. I think the nice thing about it is it's a blank slate. right? So we can program that to be a variety of different things. You talked about ideas like movies on the lawn. We could put the screen actually off the back of the ramp. It'd be like a drive-in theater almost. We could do a variety of different things. The pickleball area that you talked about behind the building, I think could be a multi-use space that could be covered and, you know, had curling in the winter. It could have a small ice skating rink. There could be a variety of different things here on this site. And I think the ability to be able to transcend this elevation grade change will be the tricky part. Make sure that we're still ADA accessible in a lot of this as well, so that everybody can have access to these variety of different spaces. But the opportunity to have a fixed restaurant with maybe some other three-season kind of covered areas would really expand the use of this space as well.
Good, thank you. Any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Menarek from Confluence? Okay, all right, folks, thanks. I think it's nice to have that consensus around heading in the right direction. So I think that should be reinforcing to not only Mr. Neuendorf, our team, but the Frauenschuh United team as well. So look forward to the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us this morning. I see we're at the 9 o'clock hour, and we got a couple other things to cover yet. HRA commissioner comments. Anyone have anything? Otherwise, we'll go to the executive director.
Mr. Mayor, we still have to pick up the 60.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. I was thinking about that off and on as we were going through this conversation, and I waltzed right by it. So thanks for that. So let's go back. Go ahead, members. Commissioner Staunton, go ahead.
I'm going to need to duck out here in a couple of minutes, but my biggest concern on this was just making sure that what we're doing is going to dovetail with what we're planning, and whether we have flexibility on that. I know we've got some deadlines in terms of encumbering some money, but I don't want to end up, you know, this needs to seamlessly fit in if we do a lawn on that north side, because really part of the advantage of having that lawn on the north side is to entice the development to the north to turn around and face it. So I wouldn't want it to be a barrier. And so it needs to be at the right elevation, and the span of the bridge needs to be far enough west so that it's not interfering with the boundary between the lawn and that property to the north. And that's all I wanted to get a sense of, because I really couldn't get a sense of that from the drawings that were in the materials.
Yep. Thank you. That's a good clarification for folks. And Commissioner Anderson, you had some concerns you wanted to express too, or some thoughts.
Yes, thank you. I'm pretty much on the same thinking level as Commissioner Staunton, but would add that we talk about the parking there, and it's going to be a key element. And so access to the site is going to be important as well. And I'm becoming more concerned as we take a look at the only elevations that I have been provided with so far on the construct of the bridge. It seems to be open. If it is open, then that's definitely going to limit the numbers of people and who will be able to access the site in winter months. Without that's going to happen. And so I just think we want to be very, very careful about that. I'm certain that under engineering constraints, it's very workable, and that it will hold up, and that you can convey people in that way. I threw out the thought of an elevator. I still think that would be a useful addition. I also know that there's cost constraints. I understand. However, I don't see large groups of people coming across that bridge and using it with ice and snow and inclement weather. I'm sorry, but I don't see that. And so I think going forward, we need to consider it. And then, of course, how it ties into the site and its access there, it's going to be pretty key. We definitely want people to use that parking ramp. And so we have time, I think, to reconsider that a bit. And that would be my strong preference.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. And then Manager Neal, did you have a comment before Commissioner Pierce speaks?
Well, just to comment on your options in terms of today. If it's important to the HRA that we fund this project out of the tax increment finance district that's available, you have to make this decision today. That we have to have the project encumbered by the end of June, so just a few days away. We've kind of pushed this just through timelines that have coalesced here. We've kind of pushed this to the very end of the consideration period. So that's one thing. If the financing of it is not a critical element to you as an HRA member, we can finance this other ways by tax levy. But all those other ways impose a financing burden on everyone in the community as opposed to just the properties that are in the TIF district itself. So I think there's a big benefit to financing it through the TIF district. The design issues, a lot of the design issues that we are pushed to consider are site driven and how we connect to the parking ramp on the other side, on the west side, but also driven by the railroad. And as you are building a bridge over a railroad, an active railroad line, the railroad has a lot to say about the design of the bridge. And so a lot of our consideration in terms of design were driven by that. And some of that is not flexible. Commissioner Anderson's asked about, I think, a roof covering. That's something we can take a look at and see whether a railroad will allow us to do that or not. But the elevator issue was one that came to us that was came too late actually to be incorporated into the design of the project that we're bidding now. Could it be something that we look at in the future as an additional element to that project? Sure. We've not evaluated that yet, but that's something that might be considered in the future as well.
Can we make any changes as we kind of proceed here?
In changes in what sense?
Design changes?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's important to talk about.
Well, there's the normal change order process that is included in any kind of project. If that's so, that handles minor design changes. Mr. Neuendorf may have. Mr. Milner was not able to join us today, so some of the structural considerations we can't really comment on today, but Bill may know something more about some of the minor design issues.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit, and I'll share my screen. That might be helpful.
Hey,
Commissioner Pierce has a comment he wants to make before we advance this conversation any further.
I just wanted to just add, I do count on these meetings ending as scheduled at 9. And so I do have a hard stop at 9:15. I can go a little bit over, but it's incumbent on us to just set the agenda so that we can achieve it within the time allotted in future. So I can go another 10 minutes, and I don't know how that impacts anything we need to vote on today.
Yeah, and I have to depart right now. I'm out of time. I got a meeting I got to get to. So I'm supportive of the money. I want to make sure we use the TIF money, but we got to make sure it fits with what we're doing going forward. If that means we have to make changes in the future, so be it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Member Shaw.
Thanks.
All right, let's get to these comments quickly, Bill, because I think the design elements are really critical. I feel like the design of it falls far short of what it should be to create the dynamism that we want. Understanding the railroad has a large voice here, but I think Commissioner Anderson's comments in particular were apropos. We need to figure out a way to put a cover on this thing, and it needs to have amped up design on it, even if we have to put in those little grids. If we put more art sheets on the side of it, like you've got some of them on there now, to me, it's really almost pitifully designed right now. Go ahead.
Sure. So I'll run through this briefly. So this is just the overall arrangement of it. So the bridge and the sidewalk is the yellow. There is the 35-foot grade change, so that the red is the retaining walls to support the the dirt that supports the whole structure. We didn't, on the connection to the parking structure, there's only handicap stalls on one of the levels. The other ones just aren't, the other level just is not handicap accessible. So we've provided a ramp so that someone in a wheelchair or with any mobility issues has easy access to that level. And then for convenience, we did provide a stairway to the level of the ramp that is not ADA accessible today. So the idea of an elevator, we could always do that, I suppose. But in order to actually make it ADA accessible, we're tearing down the parking garage and rebuilding it. So that's, you know, maybe that's for a different generation. As far as the grade change, this is a slice through the sidewalk. So on the east side, we're planning on starting to fill in that 35-foot deep hole. So if you're at the Starbucks drive-through, you're around this level. In order to meet the railroad's requirements, we have to elevate the bridge even higher than that existing grade, but not for the entire way. You know, it's a ramp basically. And then to start raising the elevation, we've bid in this contract that the contractor would start to fill in the hole with dirt. It's graded at a 2-to-1 slope so that it doesn't all erode. But we wrote into the contract that this final grade might change based on what happens on the North Plaza. So this area won't actually be constructed until next year, 2022. So we have some time to figure out what that North Plaza looks like. And also with the final landscaping, we've structured the contract so that that can be changed at no expense to us. We don't want to put in $250,000 worth of landscaping and then rip it out to build a plaza. So we can deduct that with no penalty. And then regarding the overall architecture and structure of the bridge, these panels well, the railroad's requirement is for chain link fence. That's the only thing they'll approve. So we've worked with them to reach some kind of compromise. So we're providing some kind of artistically designed panels that would replace most of that chain link fence, but still have that safety precaution that the railroad requires. These are placeholders. So the actual art panels, these just show circles. They could be squares, they could be triangles, they could be art, but they can't let a golf ball through it. That's the criteria of the railroad. If we want to build a bridge over the railroad, there can't be any openings larger than a golf ball. So it is heavily restricted. In order to put a roof on this, I would think that we would be starting from scratch. This bridge is structurally engineered. It's built off-site and shipped in. So to add a lot of weight, like snow loading, and just the structural weight of a roof, at that point it's not a prefabricated bridge. It's a whole different structure. So I don't want to overpromise that it's simple to add a roof. It would be very expensive and might require the whole thing to be started over. So that's what I know. And if that's helpful in your decision making. The other item that I would reinforce that Scott Neal mentioned, our deadline to commit these TIF dollars is Friday, June 25th, tomorrow. So in order to expedite this, we've designed this and, you know, a 6 months project. We've condensed it into a month and a half. But today is our day for action on this, or not. So, and I can answer other questions if there are any.
Questions for Manager Neuendorf? Comments? I mean, it's frustrating, Manager Neuendorf, that we have to act today to use those TIF dollars, and we're going to act probably to do that because we see the benefit of using those TIF dollars to do this project, but we're ending up with a project that isn't going to meet most of the standards of the people that are on this call or the citizens of our town. And especially I think Member Anderson, Commissioner Anderson raised a great point about having a covered bridge. You know, I think it's a really important point. So I don't know if maybe we can approve this, and if we come back and redesign it, and if we find out it can bear the weight of some type of a cover that's artistically done, and figure out how to put some things on the side of this that make it even more artful appearing. And we have to pay for that roof out of in some other form or fashion other than the TIF dollars, that because they're no longer available. At least we would have covered the bulk of it with the use of TIF and having the adjoining property pay for it. So I don't know, what are other commissioners' thoughts? Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with the chair's comments completely. It seems to me that time constraints suggest that in order to utilize the dollars that really were always part of this project, we're probably going to move to approve that. However, I would like to do so with the potential of revisions in the future and have that be noted as we move forward. I also feel as if, and Manager Neal has mentioned this in the past, the TIF improvements to the site benefit the developer as well, and significantly. And I think that it may be a time to call upon the developer to consider the access to the site, given the nature of the challenges we have with the pedestrian bridge. That's just a thought. It's not something I think is the most critical piece, but I think we've created a lot of value with that TIF district and those improvements. And so I just want to throw that out this morning.
All right, thanks. Commissioner Pierce?
I agree with Commissioner Anderson. I'm in support, and I'm comfortable with us moving forward with the utilization of TIF dollars, with the caveat that we do come back and consider design.
Okay.
And so I am comfortable with that. And
All right.
I do have
All
to
right.
sign off, if that's okay.
Yeah, so we want to move and vote real quickly. You want to move this, Member Pierce?
Yes.
All right, Member Pierce moves the approval of the request for purchase at the Grandview pedestrian bridge and associated costs of $2,783,609.14 with the vendors identified. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, second by Commissioner Anderson. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Staunton?
He
Oh,
signed off.
Is that-
Apologies. Commissioner
Done.
Pierce?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Chair Hovland?
Aye. The motion is approved as stated. Thank you, Member Pierce, for hanging in there with us.
Yep.
Can we handle the rest of these items in a subsequent report?
We can. Bill, I don't think there was anything, Bill, that you needed direction from council, right? So
Nope, just
Yep.
information.
we can, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Okay. I mean, the main point was the dialogue continues on the two projects, I think.
Yep.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
They'll move.
Member Commissioner Anderson seconds.
Second.
All right. We got a motion and a second to adjourn. Any further conversation? Roll call, please, with respect to adjournment.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Chair Hovland?
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thanks, folks.